We're working on experimenting with mosquitoes, their interactions with malaria. You're literally dealing with weaponized anthrax, and one cut in your suit could kill you kind of thing. Satan's not an idiot. He got a third of heaven to come with him.
Are we on? Oh, crazy. Okay, this is Mr. Ryder. What's your last name?
Paslay.
Paslay?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Paslay. I've been called Paisley.
Do you know where that comes from?
No, but I'm pretty sure. I don't actually know. I want to say that my dad said it was either Scottish or Irish. But that said, his family is all from Germany. So
I was about to say I would have never called you Scottish or Irish. No shot. I would have ever guessed that.
It either comes from. I think it comes from my. I know more about my dad's side than my mom's side, but I know that my dad is super heavily German, and I want to say Paslay might be either Scottish or Irish, but I don't actually know.
You want to introduce yourself? Or at least, like, what's your major? Do you have a job? Or are you, like, a freeloader bum?
Well, we do that every now and then, but no.
Yeah. As we all do.
I'm Ryder Paslay. I'm majoring in chemical engineering and chemistry.
So cool.
And right now I'm working as a research technician in one of the labs on campus.
So how do you make a bomb?
Well, I mean, that actually is not hard depending on what you want.
I want a big boom.
Big boom? Well, I mean...
What's the technical term for a big boom?
Lots of thermal transfer.
Dang, okay, cool. I didn't expect the actual answer. That's crazy.
Lots of heat that is going to do, and a lot of pressure. I mean, a lot of explosives are literally just like some minorly reactive things mixed together to be able to either heat them up or catalyze the reaction, and then a container to make sure that they either blow up with shrapnel or that they are pressurized to the point that makes the explosion worse.
Have you made one?
No. Will
you ever?
I hope not.
Dang, okay, cool.
I mean, like, to be fair, like, you can make crude black powder pretty easily.
My man. And they're just teaching that at the college?
No, that's that's basic chemistry knowledge. You can go through chemistry 1 and figure that one out.
Okay, cool. Maybe I need to go take chemistry.
Chemical engineering broadly is like, we want some guy in a lab cooked up how to make X, right? It doesn't matter what X is, whether it's like ethanol or you need fertilizer. And a lot of chemical engineering is just like, okay, they were able to make 10 grams of it using whatever in the lab. How do we make 1,000 gallons of it a day?
Oh.
So it's just like, how do we scale up said processes to be like industry level standards so that it's usable for different companies, which has been super cool to learn. It's pretty tough sometimes, but it's been super fun.
How much of it is fun stuff like bombs and how much of it is less fun? Maybe it's all fun for you, actually.
Well,
it's not like cleaning products. If you make something that is like just the right amount of acidity level, but not too much.
Well, that's like staying in federal standards. I think the most fun part for me is every single problem feels like a puzzle. Like, there have been so many times where we're like, all right, we're going to throw whatever into a system. Say we're going to throw sand or salt water into a machine that separates the salt and the water, right?
Yeah.
How do we figure out how much water we want to get out versus how much salt we want to get out, and what materials, like, how do you go through that separation, and based on what you're going to do to said salt water, how much do you get out of either side, right? And so depending on how you do it, you can go a ton of different ways about that. But like the easiest ones are like filtering, right? If you're going to use filters, what kind of filters do you use?
Yeah.
And
how many layers of it? How many different?
Exactly. And so like, I love putting those pieces together because it feels like I'm tangibly getting to a full system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which feels really, really nice. But then there are other parts where like, I hate physics. Physics is awful. Worst subject ever. Physics 2 is the worst. I hated magnets and electricity. But yeah. Fluid mechanics, rough class.
I've never taken a class about physics or anything above high school level. So
yeah, like physics 1 is like, you got torque, you got tension, you got forces, right?
Yeah.
Physics 2 was like, all right, AC, DC current and magnets. And I was like, my mind is blown. Nothing makes sense. I don't want to do physics anymore. But I got through it. And I think the hardest part for me is the physics side of it, because it's all like, you got equations for diffusion. You've got equations for fluid and how it's mixing with each other, and to how that will affect not only like your reactions and how those will progress in like a container or reactor that you're using to be able to do. But it also affects like, well, if it goes from two liquids to a sludge, how do we move that out? Like, you've increased your density and viscosity to the point where it doesn't move as well. So then how do we compensate for that?
That's
and you
more
have to
of
be
an
able,
engineering problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, chemical engineering, you're supposed to be
Yeah,
able
there
to
you
like
go.
work with that kind of thing.
It's in the name.
Yeah, it's stuff like that where I get like a little bit lost in the weeds of like, oh my goodness, we're doing so many equations here, and I get a little bit lost in the variables. But I haven't found anything yet that has really stumped me so far, outside of a couple pretty rough classes.
Do you study the effects of the things like we eat, the chemicals within the food, that how they interact with the body?
Sometimes that can be a facet of chemical engineering, to do some of that stuff. But normally when you get into that level of, these are the effects, these are the how this chemical is doing the process that it does in your body, right? Like, perfect example would be not arsenic. What is it?
Baking soda.
I was thinking it was was it anthrax? No. It was one of the ones where it picks up iron in your body. And so like the reason it's so deadly to people is because it gets into your bloodstream, and it takes up portions where iron should be. So your body gets starved from the inside out, right?
Whoa.
It's stuff like that, where there are some chemicals that will do that to you, that are just, you can't do anything about it. And so any sort of exposure to that kind of thing will be really, really bad. And that you obviously need to keep that away from people.
Sounds like mustard gas.
Yeah. Well, mustard gas is just like a reactive gas that eats you alive.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Well, that's
How
why
pleasant.
like, chlorine gas. That's why you never mix ammonium and bleach in your. That's wrong. I forget the deal. You can make it with basic cleaning.
Like home cleaning products.
Yeah. A lot of people kill themselves because they mix them both together and then like leave it, because they think it's supposed to be like a long acting thing. And then they make mustard gas in their house and either like hurt somebody, or they're like, oh my goodness, why did I wake up with 2nd-degree burns all over my body?
Oh.
It's like, oh, chemical burns. That's cool.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. But it's basically you mix. Was it
ammonia and bleach?
Is it ammonia and bleach? Yeah. Okay, then yeah. You mix ammonia and bleach together.
What?
Yeah, I was like, this will be fine. And I could have died. It was cool.
Yeah, it's really bad stuff. You inhale it and it will literally melt your lungs. That's the danger about it, because it's a reactive gas that is lighter than air, so it always will, or it's roughly the density of air. It's not actually,
people
but
don't make it more often.
Well, it's really hard to contain things that are gases.
That's
like,
true. That's a good point.
You can make it really easily, but like containing enough to be able to use in such a way that you would like hurt somebody or do anything other outside of like poison your own bathroom is really difficult. But anytime that there is somebody who like does this and then like leaves it and then gets hurt or dies because of it, like you have to then have like an entire biohazard team come in, because you now have this huge, like, it's going to eat away at everything in the house. It's going to be a huge problem for everybody that is living in whatever residency, because it's like, it's a gas, it permeates into literally everything. And if you're not careful, you could like actually kill somebody with it.
What are you studying right now? Or what are you working on, rather? Because I think yesterday you mentioned mosquitoes.
Yeah. Right now I'm working on, we're as a lab team, we're working on experimenting with mosquitoes and their interactions with malaria. So a lot of our research has to do right now with I don't actually know how much I'm allowed to say because a lot of the research hasn't been published yet.
Okay, gotcha.
But generally speaking, in concept, there are some biological processes by which mosquitoes and malaria will pick up certain nutrients. And we've figured out that somewhere along that metabolic pathway, malaria loses the ability to pick up the byproducts of the nutrients.
Whoa.
And so the hope is that at some point when we figure out, right now, a lot of the experimentation is how does the mosquito utilize these nutrients and how do they actually interact with the chemicals? What are the effects of different supplementations of different levels of chemicals? All with the hope that if we can increase certain aspects of the mosquitoes, we might also be able to decrease them by using similar methods. And at some point, there may be a way to decrease either the amount of mosquitoes that get infected with malaria in the first place, so there's less things spreading it, or if they do catch malaria, their ability to fight it off might be super important, and their immune response might be enough to be able to suppress the virus long enough that when they get infected, they're not actually able to pass it on to other things.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And that's all happening at U of I.
Uh-huh.
Crazy to me, dude.
Super awesome.
That's insane.
Yeah.
All of this stuff goes way over my head. I don't understand half of it, but this is awesome.
Yeah. Well, the idea is that you're supposed to be able to just limit how many people are going to get the disease.
Absolutely.
And you're trying to limit the vector by which, and normally, I think malaria has become endemic to the United States. We can't really get rid of it right now. But the hope would be that either with some kind of treatment, some kind of alternate mosquito, because they already have down, I think in Arizona, University of Arizona, they created a species of mosquito that processes this nutrient very, very quickly. And so what they were able to do is they were able to prove that with 1 to 3 day old mosquitoes, there's actually a drastically decreased infection rate with these mosquitoes. But they couldn't prove, or at least I don't think, I actually need to go back and read the study to confirm it. But they were not able to confirm whether or not the mosquitoes could reproduce in the same manner, or not in the same manner, but to the same level as native mosquitoes. So they were very, very cautious about, like, we have this now new mosquito we've kind of genetically modified that is a little bit more viral. It's actually a lot more virally resistant to malaria, but we don't know what its survival like if it could survive in the wild to the same extent that regular mosquitoes can. And we really don't want to take that risk, because if you were to do something that influences the mosquito population in such a way as to put pressure on it, then either the mosquitoes will figure out a workaround, whether it's something that was an unintended, like it just is a change in behavior, like they change their feeding habits or something to get around what you're trying to do, or it's that your changed mosquitoes can't keep up with the native ones. Then in either case, all you've done is either interbreed with the mosquito population so that now there is this kind of like resistance to or unintended consequence of that could be this huge problem later on. Kind of like with the viral resistance we're seeing to penicillin, that happens much more commonly now with some bacterias.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I've heard that we don't have many generations left before all the antibiotics that we're using will just be useless because of all the diseases, I suppose, learning to combat them and or just go around them.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've been using penicillin since 18 something, right? When was penicillin invented?
Look it up, John.
That's a great.
John's here to look it up.
But we've been using it as an antibacterial for who knows how long, and it did a very, very good job in the beginning, and slowly viruses have become resistant to it. But that's why there's like hospitals do or try to keep such a clean deal, because any virus, that's also why viruses in hospitals are like some of the most dangerous in the world, because anything that can go up against the hospital's cleaning, like staff, all of the biological stuff that they have in a hospital, they use all kinds of cleaning agents, they use all kinds of disinfecting agents,
all the filters,
but anything that survives that is I mean, the beefiest of the beefy, if you want to think about it that way, virus that is resistant to all of the stuff that they've done to it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get sick in a hospital, it's really bad news. And that can be, I don't know, it's really, really rare that it happens, but it can, which is a terrifying thought.
That is terrifying. My mom works at a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't work she works with the babies. So she's not necessarily exposed to all the diseases and all that.
My dad is an
the
ER
sick
nurse,
people, if you
so
will, but
I've had a little bit of the stories, but
yeah,
they do a good job of trying to keep everything as clean as they can.
cool, dude.
Yeah.
So you're just jabbing mosquitoes to eventually release them into the world?
Not necessarily. Right now, it's like I said, it's a lot of the mosquitoes that I have handled and done. We use and we have to like kill after the experiments are done, because we have to maintain a simulated wild population of mosquitoes that we draw from. They're supposed to be like our genetic baselines to be able to do experiments on, to model what would obviously be the experiment. But a lot of it is we do it. We raise the mosquitoes, raise them into adulthood, use them for the experiments, and then either sometimes the experiments are letting them live out to their natural end. Some of them are, we end up having to cut it off because we've infected them with malaria, and that's obviously a huge liability to keep around. We can't exactly do that, but everything is done ethically within federal standards. So,
how do you test the infection rate? Do you test on animals, on people, some volunteer guys like, yeah, I'll get malaria?
No. A lot of the way that you test a mosquito is you do dissections, and the mosquito organs are actually laid out very interestingly. They have what is called a midgut that runs almost all the way through their entire body, but the majority of it is in their abdomen. And within that midgut, when they take up blood, right, of an infected host, right? So if, say, a mouse got malaria, right, and for whatever reason it's a carrier, the mosquito bites the mouse. Obviously, the mosquito, the malaria parasites are going to get into the gut of the mosquito first, right? It's where the blood is. It's where all the processing is going to be done. It's where all of the nutrients are going to be that the mosquito is trying to get to. And so what happens is I don't remember what it's specifically called, but to measure mosquito stuff, we will dissect the midgut, and we will dissect the salivary glands of the mosquito. And when we get in there and we do it, a lot of the stuff is we are looking for oocysts in the mosquito gut, which are indicators that it's like spores of malaria that have like little colonies of malaria that have popped up in the gut, that are, once they mature, will turn into is it sporocysts? There's a terminology there. It might be sporocysts, that will then travel to the salivary glands, and the salivary glands then are obviously what will bite you, and the sporocysts will travel from the salivary glands into the new infected deal when the mosquito takes up blood next time. So a lot of it is tracking, especially with general infection rates. You normally pay attention to the oocysts because those are the easiest ones to get to. It's very easy to get to mosquitoes' midguts. It's a royal pain in the butt, from everything I've heard and seen, to be able to accurately and do salivary glands every single time. It's a pretty delicate little procedure to do. And so if you're going to do it like 75 times to be able to get a baseline for a bunch of mosquitoes, you're like, okay, guys, we're here for 3 or 4 hours, just like, sit at a microscope and pinch and prod away with tweezers to be able to get at this one little itty bitty piece. And then to measure that is a whole process. But normally when we're doing infection rates, we either measure in oocysts or sporocysts. But oocysts are normally used to be able to determine the progression of said infection. Obviously, the more oocysts that occur, the more infected the mosquito is. And sporocysts are used to determine like a general baseline for how, what kind of viral load the mosquito would deliver, and how likely a host would be to being infected if bitten by a mosquito.
Cool, dude.
Yeah.
So you're just, man, so you literally put a mosquito underneath a microscope.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I wouldn't like looking at it. Feel like,
they're actually pretty cool up close. They're much more interesting up close than they are like just looking at them regularly.
Well, absolutely. Just looking at them just with your eyes. Might as well. They're annoying.
Yeah.
Just want to kill it. Like, enemy spotted. You
Yep.
know? Yeah.
I get that.
Cool, dude. All right. Rad. You're very thorough. I like it.
I try to be. I don't always succeed, but I do try to be.
Did you look up the penicillin?
Yeah, I did like an hour ago. So it was invented in 1928 discovered in 1928 by a Scot named Alexander Fleming. So, yeah.
Okay.
Shout out to Fleming.
So that's actually a faster timeline. So it's only been about 100 years, a little bit less than 100 years. We've been using penicillin, and all of a sudden, we're now seeing bacteria strains that are completely resistant to it.
Wow, that's terrifying. So what is the?
Just remember, every time a doctor gives you a prescription for an antibacterial, antifungal, whatever, always take it until the dose ends. Okay? That's not kidding. A lot of people will accidentally make their infections worse because they take half the dose, start feeling okay because all of a sudden the virus is not giving them the symptoms anymore.
Yeah.
And then when they stop taking it, the virus has a chance to adapt and actually become resistant to the medication. And then the next time that they come back, they're like, I'm still having all these symptoms. And the doctor will be like, okay, well, then we'll prescribe it again. And then they give them a bigger dose that next time. And if they do the same thing again, it starts this really vicious cycle. And that can also be something that kills people.
Wow.
Very fun. Viral medicine is wild and wacky.
What is the clearance level of your room with all the mosquitoes?
It depends. Most of the accessible to the public stuff that you don't need huge stuff to get into is either biohazard level. I think it's biohazard level 1 for most of it. And biohazard. Do you know biohazard safety standards for labs and stuff? Okay, it's ranked from 1 to 4. And so level 1 is very basic. Wear gloves when you touch anything. Don't breathe in. Don't sniff the chemicals. Don't taste anything.
Toilet.
That kind of level of as long as you're not a complete idiot and don't use bleach as eye drops, you're going to be fine, right?
Awesome. Okay.
Level 2 is lab coats, gloves, and preferably masks as well. You're going to be, although masks are kind of the optional one. It depends on what you're working with. Mostly it's lab coats, gloves. Try to make sure that everything is obviously in any lab, it's closed-toed shoes and jeans. Don't want any splashes or anything getting on you. But
nor do you want to contaminate.
Yeah. And it's the next step up. Level 3 is where you get to kind of the really nasty stuff where you want masks, you preferably want goggles, you want lab coats, gloves, full coverings for all of that. It's everything short of being completely in an isolated suit. And then level 4 is the completely isolated. You're using HEPA filters for air filters, and you have decontamination in and out of the lab that you're going into. It's the you're literally dealing with weaponized anthrax, and one cut in your suit could kill you kind of thing. That's the scary one. The ones that we deal with on campus though are level 2. So every time I go in, we have to deal with human blood product. As well as we use for some experiments, mosquitoes take up better from mice as opposed to other methods of blood. So anytime we want to infect them with malaria, it doesn't survive very well in synthetic blood or ordered blood products that has not been in a host for very long. So we will use mice as a vehicle to infect them with malaria whenever we do that with mosquitoes. And so a lot of that is with the animal handling. If obviously a malaria infected mouse gets blood on you, gets any sort of deal near any sort of cut or wound, that's a huge, that's a big deal. Yeah. So it's all level 2 stuff. It's lab coats. Sometimes we'll wear masks and obviously gloves on all the time. But it's, I don't know, most of it's pretty chilled out. It's not anything that is crazy because most of the stuff that we'll deal with, the most dangerous things we will deal with are the malaria parasites themselves and things that we infect with the malaria parasites.
Yeah.
So as long as you're mostly full body coverings and you're not being like nonchalant and just skipping through the lab and like, oh my goodness, I accidentally fell on a bag of needles, that's crazy, you're going to be totally fine. There's not a ton of danger with anything like that. That's pretty awesome.
Cool, dude.
Yeah.
So what are the chances of one of your fellow coworkers or students grabbing a malaria mosquito and just walking out with it?
Very low. It's so extremely low, it's not even funny.
Dang, all right, shoot.
We keep the malaria in
fun?
like contained rooms. It's very, like, we're very, very strict on who can come in and out.
Yeah.
And any time that there is even the hint that something infected with malaria has escaped or even attempted to at all, it's dealt with very, very seriously. Like we've had no incidents so far with any sort of infections. We've only had a couple times where we had even hints of bacterial like problems, with some of the wild mosquitoes. And even then we ripped everything out, did a full deep clean and came back to it. And it was, we disinfected the entire lab multiple times over to be able to make sure that everything was sterilized and in a good environment. We keep a tight ship, and the amount of security that you have to go through just to be able to get into the lab it feels ridiculous at times. But then again, I'm like, well, it is kind of a really deadly parasite that could kill people. So it's like, it kind of makes sense.
Are there any other experiments going on?
Ooh, we're doing, I think, can I talk about that? I know that there is a couple labs over. They've done some experiments with genetics, and like zebrafish is one of the deals that they have. I don't know what those experiments were exactly. I know that some of the biological science department was doing experiments with genetics and zebrafish a couple labs over.
What makes zebrafish important?
I have absolutely no idea. I only know that one of my buddies that was working in that lab, that was his research. Like he was on that. And I'm pretty sure that project either just ended or the experiment just concluded, or there was something there where they had collected all the data they were doing. And so they might be using that lab for a different purpose now. But I think as to other experiments that we do in our lab, the biggest ones would be we're doing a cooperative one with WSU right now, where they are testing infection rates with West Nile virus, with a different species of mosquito, and we're raising the mosquito for them, and we have the supplies for it. So we have supplied this colony, and we're raising this colony right now. And then they come in and they take a bunch of the colony, they infect the mosquitoes, and they do everything back at their campus. But they just don't have the facilities to like sustain a colony on their deal. How
do you grow just like a little colony of mosquitoes? It's an incubation tank with all the little eggs and stuff?
Kind of. I'm pretty sure most of this is public knowledge. I don't see why it wouldn't be. A lot of the stuff is like, you have mosquitoes have 4 parts of their life cycle, right? You have, obviously, they are an egg, gets laid by the female in water, right? The egg will then hatch into a larva. It looks like a little hairy worm. They're little
Gross,
goobers.
Kill that thing.
Yeah, but they're super uber tiny. They're very, very small. Once the larva gets old enough, it's had enough food, it will start to turn into a pupa. It grows a little shell and kind of curls in on itself. And it looks a little bit like how you would imagine like a tadpole if it turned in on itself, kind of thing.
Okay, yeah.
That kind of vibe, except for that it's got a little shell, kind of like a shrimp, actually. That's a very, very tiny shrimp. And then once the pupa gets to a mature enough stage and is ready to pupate, it will try and get to the highest point possible before it cocoons itself, and then it sheds its shell. And then obviously a fully grown adult mosquito emerges. And then the males will mate with females, and then mated females will then go take up blood, and they use the blood to synthesize, I think it's the egg shell, or they use it to take up more nutrients, which they then use to refine into eggs and start the cycle over again.
So my blood then, so I have like little Josiah skeeters out there?
Potentially.
That's awesome.
Although technically they don't
Only if
use...
they would listen to me.
They don't use
my
the...
little swarm. Sick them on people.
That'd be pretty crazy. Unfortunately, though, they don't use the entirety of the blood. They refine certain products out of it. And I don't know what the specifics of that is. But like anytime you see like pictures of mosquitoes and they have that little like drop on their abdomen where it's like it looks like they're pooping blood. That's actually extra stuff from your blood that they're not using, that they excrete.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
there's stuff I pee out kind of thing?
Yeah, they're refining the blood for certain products that they use in their reproduction. Yeah. Cool.
So anytime I get a little skeeter bump, I know that there's eggs being made. Mm-hmm. Gross, dude.
And a mosquito can generally have, depending on the age, it can have anywhere from, I think it's 75 to like 35 eggs per batch, per mosquito. Mm-hmm. Which gets pretty crazy.
How long have you been doing this for?
Just this summer. I got on.
Oh, really? I
literally, it's kind of funny. I was looking for a job this summer and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And during literally finals week, I had applied to this position, and they were like, yeah, we want to do research technicians on campus. We're looking for people with a background in the sciences, obviously. Like we wanted to have some sort of deal, like idea what we're talking about. And I applied and they were like, okay, we had one guy who was before you, and we ended up going with him. And I was like, okay, that's fine. It happens. And so I was moving on, doing, and that was probably 3 or 4 weeks before finals week. And then during finals week, my boss now, Dr. Shirley Luckhart, she emailed me and was like, so, hey, we got this new grant proposal. And while going through the actual like money and stuff that is included in the grants, we figured out that we had enough money to be able to bring somebody on for this project. Oh, you want on? And I was like, heck yeah, that sounds so cool.
There
and
you
so
go, dude.
I immediately was like, well, I now have 4 days to find an apartment to stay for the summer in, because now I got to be able to live here. And so that was a fun little fiasco, but I think I literally went to graduation on Saturday, went to church on Sunday, and literally started Monday.
Do you think it was a God thing?
It feels that way. Yeah.
Awesome.
I was planning to, well, I was like, I want to stay in Moscow. I want so bad to stay in Moscow and do this. This seems like such a cool thing to do. And I was really kind of let down when I didn't. I was like, well, if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. And I'm not going to be torn up about it. I'll figure out something to do for the summer. I'm not going to sit on my butt and just twiddle my thumbs all summer. I would just go insane if that was the case. So I wasn't too worried about it, but I was like, it does kind of suck that I'm not getting to stay in Moscow. Because as much as I love my parents, living with my family for 3 months, I think would drive me insane. I love them to death though.
Amen.
But I literally like 3 days before graduation, it was literally like I had walked out of like my second to last final that week, and I get that email and I'm like, crap. On one hand, I'm really excited and this feels like such a wonderful opportunity just fell into my lap.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I was not prepared for this. This was not a planned thing. And now I'm scrambling to get everything in place so that I can.
Where are you right now? Where'd you end up?
I ended up staying with a family friend that I had known from middle school. And I'm subletting from him right now. And we've been roommates all summer.
Oh, baller.
Yeah.
So it's been fun.
It just so happened that he was staying in town as well. And he works for the football team.
It just so happened too that you didn't buy a mattress.
Yeah.
That's what you were saying yesterday. How's that been? Sleeping on
it's fine.
Are you couching it or are you flooring it?
No, flooring it.
Oh, my man, dude. You got a carpet at least?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Trust me, I'm not sleeping on the hardwood, but But no, it's fine. Like I got pillows, I got blankets,
Heck
I'm
yeah.
warm.
You're such a man, dude. Shoot.
That I fall asleep anywhere. That's fine. I if it doesn't affect my sleep, kind of whatever.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you seem to have a very logical mind with the wanting to do things that are tangible right in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
How is that? I'm gonna take this into a spiritual place.
Sure.
How is that kind of affected either negatively or positively your relationship with Christ? Because a lot of the relationship with God, it kind of requires faith, things that are not tangible.
Yeah.
Or they're tangible in a different sense.
I think a lot of it comes down to I can only do what I can do, and I can only worry about so many things. And at some point, I reach the end of my rope, and I'm like, well, if God wants me here, he's going to figure out a way to put me here. And as much as I would like to be like that, oh, that's cool. Oh, I want to do that. It's a lot of it is just opportunities where I don't have that opportunity without a little bit of help. And like, it's not going to happen through something that I can do. And when it comes to that kind of stuff, I'm like, well, if God's going to make it happen, he's going to make it happen. And there's just nothing I can do about it. Like, and it's an out of my hands kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the way that I had to be with this job. I was like when I got the call, I was like, heard. That was I think the clearest sign I think I've ever gotten in my life that like, yeah, you should probably be in Moscow over the summer.
That's awesome, dude. That's exciting.
I don't know for what reason. I don't know why. I suspect it was probably to kind of help deepen some of the relationships that I have with some of the people that I know.
Yeah. I know I've gotten to know you way better, which has been fun.
Well, like I've reconnected a lot with like Abby and the entire friend group. The
whole summer Chi Alpha people, whoever stuck around for the summer.
Exactly. I've gotten to know everybody a lot better. And I think that's been wonderful. Like I've had a really, really good time with it. I've also gotten to know the people at my work really, really well, and I love all of them.
Awesome.
Like I've had nothing but good experiences this summer, and it's just like one of those deals where there's not been a clear sign of my life. Like there was never it was like well, I'm going to do what I can. And I'm going to try to go where I think is best. But at the end of the day, if God wants me somewhere, he's going to wave the flag.
Amen,
I just got to be able to see it. Like I just pay a little bit of attention to the little details, and I mean, pray about it.
How do you think you hear God?
Not very often, but I try, and I think there's some stuff where like every once in a while I'll catch myself and I'll be like, man, this is a moment where I just need to thank God for what I have. And there are those moments where it's like I truly am thankful. But I normally, the times I hear him, it's like well, there was not much to change or interpret about that one. That was a red flag or green flag. Yep. Do this or don't. And I don't know. I think I just need to read my Bible more, get a little bit more into that kind of thing.
Do you have an example of like I like to ask Christians this, where it's like, do you have a moment where there's no way that it wasn't God?
I mean, most of the stuff that I would say about that kind of thing, where it was a truly a God moment and there was nothing I could have done to change or affect, are like the near-death scenarios.
Do you have any?
I mean, a couple. Like growing up in Idaho, there's always been. I don't know. Growing up in North Idaho, we were crazy. Dude.
Yes, sir.
And like I've broken my fair share of bones. I've done my fair share of stupid stuff that I really shouldn't have done. But I mean, there's a couple times where like my little brother, the first time we weren't trail riding on dirt bikes, decided to go drive off a cliff. Guess who got sent to go down and get him?
How big of a cliff we talking? 20 feet?
No.
500 feet?
It was probably, I don't know, yay steep. And
like a 70-degree angle-ish?
Yeah. One of definitely like the really, really steep sides of the mountain kind of thing. Okay, not like cool. A total cliff, like it's straight drop off, but
for sure.
Something that you're really not going to enjoy falling down.
You're going to fall.
Yeah. And granted, my dad taught us how to ride when I was maybe 8. 8 or 9.
Dirt bikes or
Yeah,
like
dirt
bicycles?
bikes. Dirt bikes.
Awesome.
And so I was 9, Kale was 8, and Zach was probably 6. So Zach is on this little 50cc, and so he's putting along.
Yeah.
We're all going, having a wonderful time, and I'm behind Zach to make sure that he doesn't do anything stupid, right? Well, he got himself caught in a rut and just off the cliff.
Just floored it off the cliff.
He couldn't. He tried. He was like, I'm stuck. As he just didn't even think to hit the brakes. And like super funny stuff like that. I mean, he probably slid down the mountain 20 feet before ditching the bike and like grabbing onto a bush or something.
Yeah.
Trying to climb his way back up. And then I literally jumped off of my dirt bike panicking. I'm like, oh my gosh, Zach just threw himself off a cliff. Oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And then I look down, I see him hanging onto a bush like dear life. And his dirt bike is caught in the bushes down further. And I run to my parents who were just up the trail a little bit waiting for us at an intersection. I was like, Zach drove off a cliff. You gotta come help.
The panic they would feel.
Oh my goodness. And so then my dad turns back around, we ride over, and he takes one look and he's like, he's fine. He fell down the hill. Whatever. He's like, Ryder, go get him up, get the bike, and get back on the trail. No biggie. Not even worried about the bike at all. He's just like, whatever. Nobody got hurt and it was fine. But like, it was just one of those deals where just the second your heart drops, as like you just watch him go over and you don't see him anymore. It was like, oh crap.
The feeling of morality and that. Yep, that's not.
Yeah. Other than that, I think the closest thing would probably be this job, because it was literally like out of the blue. I had thought that I had already they had already picked somebody. I was like, oh, so the position's closed. Like they got somebody for it. It's not something I'm going to be doing. Whatever. I'll just find something back in Coeur d'Alene or Spirit Lake or whatever for the summer. And then it just literally out of the blue kind of fell into my lap. And I was like, okay, God, I don't know what you want from me besides the like obedience to do what you're doing. I don't know why you're doing this. I don't know how you pulled this one off, but like message received. If you want me here, then this is where I'll be.
What are the job opportunities for a chemical engineer? Like what after college, where are you looking for work, or what do you want, or what is the expectation? It
can kind of be anything. Like that's the fun and also it's terrifying bit about it. You can do everything from environmental consulting, where like a company, you'll go to a company and you'll say, hey, federal standards just changed. We need to cut emissions. And you'll be like, okay, how do we do that? Well, my consulting company is really, really good at designing pieces to be able to reduce emissions. Okay, so then company hires you, you build the thing, improve the system, whatnot. That's a total job that you can do. Mm-hmm. And you can be involved in any number of processes along that, whether it be the design, putting it together, testing it, that kind of thing.
So there's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on in that. You can also be involved in like the oil industry. If you wanted to go do anything for like Chevron or Mobil 1 or any of these big oil companies, you can also go there because they need, like in the refining process, in the actual mixing and like what the standards are there. There's all kinds of research that goes on into that that pays very, very well. You can do nuclear energy, you can do solar, wind, like all the sustainable energy options and any of the research involved in companies there. You can also go into all I'm saying, I'm not a bad
You're good.
I don't consider myself a bad person.
You want to move it back a little bit closer? You're chilling.
Oh, okay, you're totally good. But if Raytheon was to pay me $250,000 a year, I might just sell my soul and join the military industrial complex.
There you go.
Building bombs. That's also a thing that you can do. There's chemical engineering research to be done there, in whether it's material science or chemical engineering, doing the alloys and all of the fuel and all the stuff that goes into the military industrial complex on that side. You can also do like patent engineering for different companies and
Mm-hmm.
figuring out the legalese of how do we make this its own thing without differentiating it from literally everything that we've done before, and how do we make it its own individual product without making it too individual almost, so that it you want it to be individual but not so individual that it's too specific, because if it's too specific then you change one thing and it's like it's a new product, right?
Yeah, right.
And so that's a whole field to go into. There's so much to different things, and I'm kind of like, I mean, you can go everything from the oil industry to making French fries involves chemical engineering. Like it's crazy the amount of jobs that you have doing. And so I don't know, it's kind of like I want to explore fields and see what's out there. This was just a very like, it was a good way for me to get experience in a field that is tangential to mine. Like biological sciences aren't something that I would ever have thought that I was doing, but at the same time, it's been super fun. It's been super interesting.
Yeah.
It's made me look at doing either a PhD or a master's degree afterwards.
Whoa.
Because like I have realized that I do love doing some of the research. Like I like to see some of these things pan out. I like to do and be involved in.
It's a process and an enjoyable one.
Yeah, and I like the deal where the research that we're doing is stuff where if you were to go out and look, there's not data there. Like there's truly no answers to the questions that we're asking, and so we're like, well, how do we find them? How do we actually solve this problem, and how do we solve this in such a way that we make it so that it's provable to other people and replicable by other people
by the scientific method.
Yeah. And I love that about what we're doing. And I think that's so cool. I love to be able to answer that question and to be able to fill in that blank. And especially because it's relatively close to not the beginning of the process, but like we are only in the stages where we are figuring out biological processes in the mosquito and how they actually work. Like we don't know a ton of the mechanisms by which some of these things work. And we don't know what the effects of different supplementations of different nutrients in these metabolic processes work. We're kind of like, we just dose them with it and see what happens. Like we don't know. We truly don't have data on what this, we have theories, but we don't have anything to back them up yet. So we got to figure out, well, does this data corroborate? Does it actually mean what we think it means? And what does this imply about what our next experiment should be? And so we're just barely starting down that, chasing that rabbit hole, and getting down to the nitty gritty of, well, what does this actually mean? What are we doing here? And how are we going to make this so that it's controllable? Because if we can control it in the positive and negative, then we can use it to either benefit or kill mosquitoes based on stuff that we want.
Yeah. Wow, dude. So you're deep into the science realm.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that play into your relationship with God? Because I feel like a lot of scientists, at least in the mainstream media, right? A lot of the bigger names, they will try and use it as a defense against God, if you will.
I think the way that I personally look at it, and Peter had a wonderful, not the biblical Peter, our Peter.
Yeah, shout out to Peter, Chi Alpha.
Yeah, we did a book study, and I forget what it was called. I don't remember now. I know that I have it at home, and we read the whole thing, or we read like half of it. But there's a chapter in there that covered this exact deal, and I really, really liked his explanation. And it basically came to the conclusion that science doesn't necessarily disprove God, and we don't need to see it as a conflict. I think that part of having faith is science. We know that it's fundamentally the way that we guess that it's fundamentally the way that our world works, and we haven't seen anything to corroborate otherwise yet. That's why theories are theories, but the underlying principles in what we discover, I don't think necessarily contradicts God, and I don't think that manifests in such a way that it's an argument against. I think that a lot of the science we see is well, could it be intelligently designed? Sure. And is there an argument to be made there? I think there are debates to be had there. But at the same time, it's the joy of science in my eyes is the discovery of, and I think that goes hand in hand with appreciating like the beauty of the world that we live in.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether or not you see it as something that is naturally occurring or divine. And I think that like, I personally believe that a lot of the revelations in science are like, yeah, I don't think that necessarily like disproves God or means that we have any sort of deal that is against religion as a whole. I just think that it's like I accept it in stride. I don't think that they're inherently contradictory.
Yeah, for sure, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I've always understood it to be like science is just trying to understand God's creation. At least that's the most simple way that I've ever heard it described.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of science is just shooting into the dark and seeing what we hit, and based on that, what can we guess about the world around us?
Cool, dude.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to be, you want to get a job in Raytheon?
All I'm saying is that if they paid me so much money, I might.
Sponsor us, Raytheon.
I don't think that's going to happen, buddy.
You don't think so?
No.
Not yet, maybe.
They're such a
5 years.
huge company. It would be crazy.
That would be cool.
It would be super
Buy our
cool.
weapons.
They already do. They're like, I think it's them, Lockheed Martin, and Blackstone are like the biggest military contractors, or not? No, military development companies. They're like the three big names when people talk about like the military industrial complex.
Yeah, cool.
But yeah, they do everything from like
kind of cool.
They do everything
Military
from like,
industrial complex is complex. It's in the name.
Yeah. But yeah, they like any of those companies, they take on so many people and they provide a ton of jobs, but at the same time, it's super high level technical stuff, which would be super, super interesting to work on. If you can get over that you're literally building bombs to kill people. But if you're okay with that, they pay so much money. Oh my gosh.
Oh, you've also mentioned the energy stuff and things, whether it be solar, wind, and or nuclear.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you think about that as a solution to the energy crisis? I don't know if there even is one. Is there an energy crisis?
Yeah, kind of.
Kind of, sort of. It's just
so,
always a problem that keeps growing.
Yeah, it's one of those deals where, like obviously, the federal government and the more left-leaning states want to get off of fossil fuels, right? Right-leaning is kind of potato, whatever. A lot of them either feel neutrally about it or don't really care at all. And the federal government wants to start leaning more on electric stuff. The only problem with that is, so far, I don't think we've been able to make it a very like economically efficient process.
Yeah.
And that's not completely fair. Like there is something to be said for solar panels have, I think, a life of 20 or 50 years normally, where they will see a decent amount of efficiency before they start to. Lifespan. Yes. Well, so the whole way, it's mostly because of how they actually catch energy. You know how solar panels actually work?
No. No, absolutely not.
Yeah. So all a solar panel is, right, is it's a bunch of layered, how do I say this? It's a bunch of layered, it's not polycarbons, it's alloys that we'll say.
What is an alloy?
A mixture of metal and some other material.
Okay, cool.
So I think they're alloys. They could be silicon. I don't remember. We did it on. There's some kind of semiconductive material, and they layer them such that when photons hit it, they will knock off electrons in some of the layers before traveling down, and all they're really doing is setting off this little chain reaction that flows down through differing layers. And at the very bottom, they have a deal that picks up the energy that is used by these photons hitting this top layer, and that's what they turn into current, right? So it's not technically
into the wire, yeah.
Yeah, and they're not actually picking up heat. They're picking up kinetic energy from photons, which is crazy to think about. But at the same time, it means that the actual, just like how a battery, like a 9-volt battery, even if you could recharge it, it can only recharge so many times before it actually wears out.
Yeah.
In the same, like your car battery can only has so much life, right? A lot of that stems from as you have these charges go one way and then the other way and then one way and the other way, because that's all a battery really does is it passes energy back and forth between two sources, right? And it basically juggles the charge between them. And you pick up a little bit of that energy as it goes across. That's why batteries do what they do. And most of them are the way that we store it is chemically. Those are anytime you see like what is it? It's not lead. Lead batteries also do it, but like the ones, battery acid that we see, all that is it's a very, very conductive solution that is used to be able to store chemical energy. So energy will flow in from one side, it'll react on this side, and then as that reaction stops, the energy stops, it will reverse itself, go back over, right? And as you do that, wires will actually start to corrode because the jumping of electrons across that wire will cause imperfections to form. So something will get knocked aside, something will get displaced so that it's not as efficient as it was before, and over time those imperceptible imperfections on an atomic level start to build up. So that's why batteries start to lose their function.
Cool.
Same thing happens with solar panels. So you'll have the degradation of these layers as electrons move through them, as photons move through them. You're getting this degradation that happens over time. And they don't conduct energy as well. They don't conduct electricity as well. They don't pick up energy as well. So most things, literally all things that conduct electricity have some sort of lifespan because we don't really have a way to be able to perfectly ensure the integrity of whatever our conductive material is.
Are you aware of the arguments to bring back nuclear?
Some of them. I think the biggest ones are that it's just the most efficient. Like it's the most energy you can cram into the least amount of space. And so the biggest arguments for it are that even though it requires a ridiculously tremendous amount of investment on the front end, it takes up some of the least amount of space. So you have to develop the least amount of land for it. But it also, especially with modern technologies and developments in some of the nuclear technology, is one of the most promising to be sustainable in that sense. Even though it is technically not sustainable, we can't exactly make uranium, at least not to my knowledge. But
somewhere deep in the government somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know of a way. I know that we refine it from the ground, but I don't think we have a way to create it. But I think the biggest problems with it are the public is still really afraid of it. It requires a tremendous amount of obviously money up front. You have to accept the risk that like there's going to be radioactivity involved. The people don't really like that. And in addition to that, you have to develop it's still a factory. Like it's still a huge complex that you're doing. It's just that it's not nearly as big as we're going to set up a solar farm. Well, we're going to take up miles and miles of farmland or whatever in addition to it being farmland to be able to do that.
Not only that, but the pollutants to make those solar panels and or the wind turbines.
Yeah, those can also be... I don't know if wind turbines are as much a problem. I don't know what they're specifically made of or what the actual environmental cost of making a wind turbine is. But I know that for solar panels, anytime you do semiconductors, you're dealing with stuff that is really, really toxic, and you need to be very, very careful with how you use and dispose of anything that has to do with that.
Do you think climate change is an issue?
Yes.
In what way?
I think that the science to be believed with climate change is mostly about how it's going to affect the intensity of storms, and how warmer climates generally tend to be a much more volatile. If you think about it in the simplest terms possible, you've put more energy into the system, right? So anytime that the system moves, it's going to move more than it would have otherwise. Which means that we're going to get more volatile storms. We're going to get more intense storms. And I don't know. I think the from a people standpoint, the equator is going to be the equator, and farmlands will always move north. I'm not necessarily worried about that kind of a thing. I think the rising sea levels could, in a couple generations, be something that is like problematic for people. Like we're seeing that in like Venice. Venice has like most of it is now underwater to some degree. And it's a city that we're going to lose at some point because it's just, that's the way it was built. It was built like on the water in such a way that you gain a couple feet and all of a sudden every house in Venice is flooded. Like, so I think there is stuff like that where it is kind of concerning. On the other hand, I think there are, especially on a geopolitical level, there's bigger fish to fry. And while we as a country are, I think, making pretty good headway, like we're not doing nothing about it. Although there can always be more to be done from a scientific standpoint.
Sure.
I think we're definitely I don't know. Some of the stuff with the EU, I think is a bad move, but at the same time, they've done good stuff outside of, I think, shutting down a lot of their nuclear plants, which I don't think was a good idea. But at the same time, I'm not the prime minister. I don't actually know. They probably had a whole bunch of other calculations that influenced that decision. But it's one of those deals where we do try. We do make attempts to. And as small as solar and wind and nuclear are in America, we do have some of the leading stuff in those fields. So in that sense, we're doing pretty good in putting stuff forward for that. And we have some of the most interesting, at least in my opinion, nuclear research going on. Like in California, was it last year? 2 years ago. I think it was last year. They had one of their first successful tests for nuclear fusion outputting positive power.
Whoa.
Yeah. They had to drain an entire city's worth of energy to do it, but it did, for a little bit, actually produce a positive output of power.
Isn't that supposed to be impossible?
No. Fusion is just difficult. It's not impossible. We know
Maybe I'm thinking of a different thing where it's supposed to make more energy than it's using.
Well, so...
Or is that what it is?
That's the... you might be thinking perpetual motion.
Yeah.
That is impossible. We've proven that that's... theoretically speaking, if you were in a zero-sum system with no friction, no tension, no multitude of other factors that affect something, perpetual motion is possible. You're giving the exact same energy that you get out, and so the motion will never stop, right? The problem is we have forces that interfere with that no matter how slight, and so perpetual motion is not possible through most areas. Nuclear fission is the release in energy of smaller atoms becoming bigger atoms. So hydrogen becomes helium. Helium becomes... Does it become... No. What's the fourth one?
I don't know.
Crap, I forgot.
Oxygen.
No, oxygen is 8.
Big nuclear reactors, they let out steam, right? I don't know if that's necessarily...
Nuclear reactors,
or if that's more just to cool down the system.
Yeah, that's where you get the steam from. Nuclear reactors, and actually that's the secondary tank of water that you see that actually produces the steam.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Nuclear reactors have rods, right? You know how nuclear fission works, right?
Kind of, sort of. I know. Is it similar to a nuclear bomb?
Kind of, sort of, not really.
Okay, explain it.
Uranium atoms, big bunches of protons and neutrons, right? They're really, really awful at staying together. And so what happens is they have rods made out of this uranium, and a bunch of these rods are put together. These rods are all about radioactively decaying, right? Radioactive decay is when electrons or neutrons will fly off of these bigger molecules and hit other things, right? That's why they're so dangerous, is because you're being broken apart at basically an atomic level by some of these particles, and they knock off parts of your gene sequencing. And that's why they cause cancer. That's why it's so dangerous to be in radioactive zones, because it causes unrepairable genetic damage. And like when...
Is it unrepairable, or do we just not have the technology for it?
It's knocking off the building blocks that make your genes stay together.
Can we not put the building block back?
No.
Why not?
Because it's just now off into the ether. It knocks the building block off into other building blocks, kind of thing. Which is why, like, when if you've ever seen any of the footage that comes from Hiroshima or Nagasaki, you see people with like their skin sloughing off of them, kind of thing. It's because all of the connective tissue in their body has disintegrated from the radiation. And that's like uber high doses. But normally, the radiation that it puts out is, it can be caught by denser materials or more stable materials, which is why water is such a good way to shield from radiation. Most space shuttles that we have, the space stations that we have, one solution to be able to deal with lots of radiation is you can't use metals. Actually, metals will let most radiation pass straight through them, so they actually don't help against stuff like that. Whereas water will actually disrupt and distort a lot of radiation and change the directions of it. So it actually makes a pretty decent shield against some radiation that we know exists in space, which is part of the reason why, like, anytime you see space shuttles, or like anytime anybody is trying to plan like interstellar travel, most of the time they'll have some kind of plan for either the cabins or some part of the ship to have like a water layer around it.
Wow.
That is circulated constantly, because it makes it so that water can either pick up or distort the radiation to make it not as harmful and not as penetrating. All this to say, nuclear reactions, generally speaking, is you throw a neutron at a uranium atom. The uranium atom will then be like, holy crap, energy, and then it splits into multiple other parts, and it literally decomposes into multiple other atoms that are smaller and more stable. Well, when that happens, obviously there's a lot of neutrons that fly off, right? There's pieces of that molecule that fly off. And those in turn hit other uranium molecules.
How does gravity work at that level? Or is that a physics question?
The easy answer is you're getting into quantum physics.
Okay, gotcha.
Gravity plays a lot less of a role at the quantum physical level. Your intermolecular forces become a lot more of a play factor. And gravity is normally a macro state observation that we make about something that is acting in a specific way, right? And while it does technically, like, it does affect the things around it, and there is a force there. Normally, when you're looking at a microscopic scale, you're not going to be looking at things that are affected so much so by gravity, because the energy that they're outputting, there's just so small that it, like, yes, there is an effect on gravity, but like, you're not going to see a huge gravity effect when you're looking at like the evaporation of water.
Yeah.
Right. The amount, well, and that's not even actually true, because the amount of gravity that you're experiencing actually does change the boiling point of water. Fun and goofy stuff. Because there is gravity keeps it more packed together. But when dealing with like what your activation energy is for a reaction or that kind of thing, normally speaking, I don't think I've done a ton of calculations where we've involved gravity specifically. There's stuff that is based on Earth's gravity, and the assumptions of the equations come from you being on Earth, because it's like assumed density, it's assumed mass, that kind of thing. But outside of those, you're not going to see a change in the fundamental principles of how things will act generally based on gravity.
Wild.
But nuclear reactions, right? You break apart a uranium atom. You got a tube full of uranium atoms, and you throw a neutron at it, and all of a sudden, one of the uranium is going to break apart, and send neutrons into other uranium atoms, which send into other uranium atoms, and yada, 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 right?
Big chain reaction.
Big chain reaction.
How do they stop it?
They have insulating, they call them, what is it? They're not blast rods. It's, they have insulating, basically walls that they put in between the rods to be able to stop the chain reaction. So the idea is that they will, the nuclear reaction can't really be stopped per se. It can be toned down to the level where it eventually will kind of peter out, but it doesn't actually stop. Like it's they're going to keep decomposing. And
it just had a less and less rate, if you will.
Yes. And so a lot of what they're control rods. A lot of what these control rods do is allow nuclear engineers to determine at what rate the reaction is going to progress and how much that, and to what level, like how much energy output you're getting, right? So a lot of this is literally that the nuclear decomposition of uranium produces a boatload of heat. Like it's a ridiculous amount of heat. And what they do is they literally have water directly around the nuclear reaction, and the water is circulated so that obviously it cools the pipes, makes sure that nothing is going to literally melt in the reaction chamber itself, but it also cycles around, and they use a system of passing water pipes next to each other, so that the water doesn't actually touch, but there is transfer of heat. And they actually heat up water to create steam with the original pool of water, because all of the water that's actually touching the radioactive stuff is uber contaminated.
Awesome.
Big bad radioactive stuff. It picks it up and it runs with it. So a lot of the water that is directly in like the chamber of the nuclear reaction itself is highly radioactive, highly toxic. Can't have it anywhere near nature, otherwise things are going to get really, really bad. And most of what you see as steam is the product of the steam engine that is run by the heating of a secondary source of water with that superheated water from the chamber.
Wild.
Yeah.
I want to hear your testimony.
I wish I had an interesting story. Like it's very, very simple and easy. Like I don't know. I grew up in the church. I never had like a heartbreaking challenge that was in front of me that I had to overcome with the Holy Spirit or anything. My grandparents were, I guess technically most of my family is non-denominational Christian, but my grandparents were, I'm pretty sure, Baptists. And they like from a very early age, it was you go to church, you do your homework, get good grades in school, and like those are the things that you do. I like we did everything from youth group to Awanas as little kids, and that was like just the environment that we grew up in. And it wasn't until probably junior year of high school that I kind of started to not fall away from it, but definitely like
question it.
Not even question it, just get a little bit of distance. It just became a less important part of my life that I focused a lot less on. And I think most of that was there was a lot of academic pressure. I was trying to succeed in multiple sports. I was playing instruments in the band, and I was also doing very, very well in academics. And so I was like, well, I kind of want to prep for senior year. I want to get good grades, get into college, and do this whole deal. And it, like, part of the reason why, like, I'm taking 5 years to do what I'm doing instead of taking 4 was in high school, I kind of burned myself out. And it was like that was horrible, and I never want to do that one again.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I got through it. But it was such a huge toll on a lot of my life that, like, it just was, I was stressed all the time. I wasn't, like, being a healthy person, as a whole, throughout the end of high school. And it got better senior year. But then getting into, like, freshman year of college and sophomore year of college, I was able to it was kind of there. freshman year. Like I went to church most of the time. There weren't very many days that I missed it, but I like wouldn't do regular Bible studies. It wasn't a part of any groups on campus really.
Yeah.
Didn't really involve myself very much. And then sophomore year, I kind of dropped off the map. I was taking, 17 credits, and 4 of those classes were either chemi specific, really, really tough classes, or they were the general chem, like really, really tough classes. And so I was like, I don't have a social life. Like I don't have time for church. I got a test on Wednesday that I got to study for. Like I don't have that hour to be able to take out of my day. And so I almost completely stopped going sophomore year. And it was like it felt awful. I didn't want to ever, like, it took me coming back this during junior year and kind of getting back into it about halfway through the semester and finally being like, well, I kind of do want to come back to the church, and I want to have that relationship again, and really come back and foster this, because I think this is important, and it's something that needs to be a part of my life and my values, that I really started to get back into, and start enjoying a lot of the things that I did previously, that I had stopped.
Yeah.
And so ever since then, like, been going to church, been making sure that it's a priority that I bully my family into doing the same thing. We give everybody crap when they miss a service, which is really fun. Really just a good way to make sure that everybody in the family is like keeping everybody honest. But at the same time, like, I don't know, it's not like the most interesting story. Like
it's totally chill. That's a blessing.
Yeah.
It's a massive blessing.
Yeah, I didn't have any hardships that drove me to it. It was kind of like it's something that I've always lived with, and I realized that living without it wasn't nearly as good or fulfilling as when I had it with me.
You were very wise if that's all it took. I mean, it was an extreme hiatus, I suppose, but a short one.
Yeah.
Relatively.
Yeah.
Cool, dude. That's awesome.
And so, like, I don't know. I think, it was good, and I can never thank my parents and my brothers enough, because they are primarily the reason why it happened. Like, a lot of the reason why I ended up circling back around to, especially in the last, like during junior year, was my middle brother, Kale. He went to college to do, like, seminary school. He wants to do theology. He wants to be a pastor.
That's awesome.
Which is crazy. He has always been the more, like, not rambunctious, but
extroverted,
a little bit more wild.
Okay.
Like, where I'm more of a homebody, he's definitely more like the get out there. So for him to be like, I want to be a pastor, I was like, I didn't see that one coming, but okay, sure. But like his constant, like, hey, it's important that you're in church. Like, I worry about you, and like I know that you're stressed about all this kind of stuff, but just know that, like, you can vent to me and like, I'll always be there for you. And I was like, crap, he might be onto something with this church thing. Like, it might actually be a really good deal, that I walked away from there. And sure enough, I started fostering these relationships again. And like, all of a sudden it was like, well, crap, I don't hate this thing anymore that I used to. And I've managed to come and circle back around to some of my older hobbies that I used to have a lot of time for, and I used to really, really enjoy, but I haven't for a while now, which has been super awesome. So
why is church important? In your opinion?
In my opinion, the easiest way is that it gives us a place to congregate, in a way that is not, like, I don't even want to say that it's not activity driven. Like, the act of worship brings us together in a way that is, you don't need planning for it. You don't need to do anything undue. It's a very easy and casual way to meet with each other most of the time.
It is.
And it opens the door to, like, what we have with the Summer Chi Alpha group, where, like, we'll meet up at Abby's house. We'll meet up at whoever's house. And it's a very nice way to, like, sustain those friend groups where everybody is kind of on the same base about most things, and you're like, and it's a very mutually supportive group of people.
Yeah.
I would say that that's probably the most important outside of the obvious, like, you're worshiping, and it's something that is commanded of us as Christians.
Yeah. How do you think you can show worship to God?
Ooh, that's a good one. I personally believe that it has a lot to do with the how you consider your actions. I think most actions can be a form of worship, and it is depending on how you view the impacts and the dedication of those impacts and outcomes to whatever you're doing, right? If you're doing it for selfish reasons, obviously it's not worship, right? If you're doing it for godly reasons, then it can become a form of worship, right?
Yeah.
Like the perfect example, I think, would be like singing, right?
Yeah.
You can do it for a church, you can do it for yourself, but like if your thought at the end of the day is, I sing and I do to be able to bring more people to God or to be able to help my church and help the congregation, then you're doing it for the right reason, and that can make it a form of worship because you're giving honor to God in that action. And I think that's the biggest part of worship, is the giving of the honor and the dedication of the outcome to Him. Whereas like, and that can actually be expanded to most things. Is like most actions can be a form of worship to God, because as long as you're doing it with the right heart, and the intentions are there, I think most things can be that way.
Cool, dude.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you have 2 healthy Christian parents.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the importance of that is? Because I don't think you know much about my Josiah lore, but my parents divorced at 12. My dad was a pastor. Love him, he's forgiven, but he is a narcissistic manipulator. And it definitely led me and all my siblings to separate ourselves from Christ for many, many years. It was only last year, July 24th, so it was very recently my 1-year anniversary coming back to Christ.
Oh my goodness.
So it's like, then you having to not have had that falling away in the same way. Do you think that is because of the parents and their example?
Almost 100%. I think the biggest thing that is the difference between like how I've seen other people grow up and be raised versus how we have, is that my parents were always like, for a very long time, we were not allowed to like take communion. We weren't allowed to do some of the other things where like we were, it was like, you don't understand what you're doing, and we don't want you to engage in this until you do. And a lot of the like, it was a go read your Bible, go understand what you're talking about and what you're actually committing yourself to before you like get baptized. Like I think
cool.
I only got baptized when I was 18. Like that, like it was a fairly recent thing for me in like the grand scheme of my life, because it was something that we did as a family, and it was after my mom and dad had sat down with all of us and actually had a conversation with us about our beliefs.
That's cool.
Yeah. Well, and that was always their approach with it, was that like we grew up in the church, but we did not grow up with the rule was always you're going to go to church, but whether or not you paid attention was kind of up to you.
Yeah.
And so their entire deal was, we're going to do everything we can to make this accessible to you. But at the same time, we can't force you to believe this.
Yeah.
And if we try and push you in this direction, you're going to become a teenager. You're going to do what you're going to do, but the want has to be from your side. Like you can't force somebody to accept Jesus into their heart. Like that's true.
That's true.
Yeah. So a lot of it was they were very, very not hands off, but when it comes to like our religious views and how we observed them, they were very much like it's a decision on your part. And yes, we want this for you. And yes, this is like how we worship. This is how we do. And that was an example for us, and it was a very good one. But it was always we do this, but you don't necessarily, like, it's not us choosing for you.
Right. That's awesome.
And I think that was one of the biggest like helps that came in, because when I came to them and I said, like, I think I've fallen away, like I'm struggling with these things, it was very much okay, we're starting then. This is where you start then. And it was not a come back to the deal and get involved in a million things at once. It was, okay, baby steps. Let's get you in church every week. Let's get you doing this. And like my brother, I love him to death, but he challenges me on literally everything. Every time I would be like, oh, what's this? I have this question about the Bible. He'd be like, oh, wonderful. Let me give you a 3-hour lecture on this one topic. And I was like, awesome. Very cool. But he's been a wealth of knowledge. Whenever I like struggle to understand something or I have a question about something in the Bible, he is always there to be able to like answer that. And he loves to do it. And I like a lot of the reason why I ended up coming back in the way that I did, and rediscovering it was again because of him. Because
That's
he
cool.
like, he went off to do it. And every time I would ask him, he's like, yeah, no, I've been doing this. I've been loving life. And it was the amount of knowledge that he gained about the Bible and how educated he became in it. I'm not going to lie. I was a little bit jealous. I was like, crap,
I want to be
man.
there, dude.
Yeah. I was
I'm
like,
not there.
I want to be.
I want to be there.
Yeah. It was
I'm
like,
only a year into this thing, and it's
crazy.
it's insane how much there is. Every verse has its own rabbit hole that can go on for. I mean, if you're trying to study it, you can literally study a single verse for months.
And there are multiple references, especially if you start getting into like historical documents. It's crazy. And like he at some points has been like, yeah, I can quote certain pieces. I know where the like different stories happen. And I'm like, I know from Sunday school that like there's Daniel in the lion's den. There's like Noah's Ark. I know some of the general stories. I know some of the wacky moments that happen. But a lot of it comes off as like, I know some general facts. I don't actually know and can't quote the passages that they come from.
I can't really defend what I believe in. At least that's where I was at, and I'm still at in a lot of regards. And I'm trying to get to the point where I'm able to defend all those points and or understand the story to a degree that I'm able to articulate it and explain it in a way that is digestible.
Yeah. I think mine was less that I can't defend what I believe in, and it's more I'm not familiar enough with the source text that I feel like I can debate somebody who is. And I don't know enough about the Bible to not have it twisted against me. And that feels really, really bad.
It does. Yeah.
Because you're like, I don't really know what to believe because there are passages that say some things, there are passages that say others, and there's different contexts around those that make both of them not incongruent statements. But at the same time, if you don't know that, like somebody can walk circles around you speaking straight stuff out of the Bible.
It's not a good feeling.
Yeah. And there are people that will try and manipulate that to be able to either make it look like Christianity is bad or that it's that somehow you should feel bad about believing what you believe. And those have always like been something that I never really knew how to deal with. Even when I had seen it happen, it was something where I was like, why is he wrong? What was the thing that I can point to that why he was wrong? And so where Cale has studied the Bible and gone into that, I think I dove a lot more into the logic and philosophy side of I want to be able to argue with somebody who doesn't believe what I believe. And when I can't use an appeal to the Bible, I'm not going to because I'm not good at it, one. But like I don't know enough to be good at it yet because I haven't studied the source document yet. That's still one of the things that I really need to get better at. But also, if I'm going to argue with somebody who doesn't share my beliefs, and who doesn't acknowledge the Bible as a primary source document for information for beliefs, how do I justify my beliefs? Because a large part of why I don't like seeing a lot of like the popular political stuff, especially surrounding religion and Christianity, is a lot of it will just be either people throwing the Bible at people who don't acknowledge it, or somebody trying to go along and walk circles around somebody with the Bible. And you're like, okay, either you're manipulating information to be able to make it seem like you're making this point when you're really not, because these statements are taken out of context, or they're not acknowledging anything you're saying because they don't believe that the document you're drawing it from is legit at all. And so both of those are unproductive ways to go about it. One of them is involves a lot of like dishonesty in the moral sense, where you're not really being honest to the person. Like, even if you're advocating for the religion, you're not really being honest about what it's saying, which feels wrong. And the other one is, like, how do you get across that roadblock? And I think that there's definitely a way to justify what we believe as Christians from the logical standpoint outside of God, which is then supported further by the fact that we're Christians and have our religious beliefs. And I think that that has to be like a part of the argument, because there needs to be a way for two sides to speak to each other in a way where they can both agree and confirm the sources, even if they disagree on the outcomes.
How much have you... Okay, so if I pretend to be a non-Christian and ask you a question like, why can we trust that God is just? Would you be able to answer that with philosophy outside of the Bible?
Kind of. I can give you like general arguments based on like what I've thought about, but at the same time, probably not satisfactorily. A lot of this is, there have been a lot of very, very good arguments made by a bunch of different philosophers on both sides.
Absolutely. Yes.
And a lot of the how you would answer a question like that would be to literally go back and read all of these books on it. If you gave me like a week of prep and the ability to go look for my own sources on it, I could probably give some pretty good arguments on it. But at the same time, like these are things that have been thought about. And I think that
Yes.
a lot of the research into, well, how do we argue this point without coming off as either a religious zealot or somebody who's not actually listening is super, super important. And so I try to look a little bit more at the logic side, whereas I know that my family definitely tends towards the it's in the Bible. Why would I question it?
Yeah. Well, I grew up with it's in the Bible, so you can't question it, which was definitely not something that I enjoyed. Even as an 8-year-old, I went, "This is stupid. I don't like this at all." So the past many years has been questioning the Bible, but even then, it's been a lot more of the major themes of it rather than the nitty gritty, which is what I really want to get into now.
Right.
The little tiny minute lessons in every single story, the things that you can really attribute to your own life and help yourself, I guess, grow closer to God. I don't know.
It's cool.
It's cool. It's fun, dude.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's kind of addicting. Because it's really, it's like a lifelong study book. That's what it is. You could study it for literally eternity, probably. I mean, I guess the Bible won't be around when we're in heaven. That's kind of a funny thought. But
we won't really have a ton of need for it at that point. I wouldn't think.
No, because we'll have God right next to us.
Yeah.
We can go dap him up and be like, "What's up?"
Yeah. That's crazy. That's actually a really crazy thought. Wait a second. That's...
Oh, what do you think heaven's going to be like? Every Christian I feel like I ask has a different...
I mean, I always
image of it in their head.
imagine it's that's such a good question. I don't
It's a
actually
fun
know.
one.
Like there's like if you believe like the imagery and stuff that is in like traditional Catholic literature or stuff like Dante's Inferno, then it's there's like layers of it. Although I don't think Dante's Inferno is actually like a pretty good source, but it did inspire a lot of.
But yeah.
Well, I mean, it's. Oh, how much trouble would I get in for saying that?
Say it all. Say everything. Get in trouble, dude.
It's essentially Bible fan fiction. It's not, but it
Amen.
kind of is.
Hallelujah.
Well, I mean, like, there's so much.
It's like Narnia, isn't it? Isn't it kind of? It's like
no. Dante at the time writes this story, and it involves a lot of suspiciously placed, like, specific popes and people that he didn't like in hell versus a lot of people that he really, really looked up to in heaven. And it's supposed to be like he travels through all of the realms and he gets to see every layer of hell. He gets to see every layer of purgatory, and he gets to see every layer of heaven.
I would love to read that.
It's actually like a very interesting read.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's where a lot of like the traditional stereotypes that we get about demonology, angelology, all of that kind of stuff.
Well, that stuff's been fascinating too.
Yeah. It's where we get a lot of those stereotypes. And that whole deal. Very fun, very goofy. That's where, like, I think it's is it 9 layers of hell or 7 layers of hell?
Look it up, John. Dante's Inferno.
I'm pretty sure it's 9.
I think it's 9, but that's where that concept comes from. Is it's or at least I think where it was popularized.
When
Might not have come from there.
when was the imagery of a red devil with horns and a spiked tail come into play?
That is a great question.
Culturally speaking,
I don't actually know. I would imagine that is.
it's great fear mongering.
Yeah, 9 circles. Also, can you
9
pull
circles.
the mic closer?
Oh, is it?
Oh,
It's like way far away.
Oh, okay.
there we go. Thank you.
I think first time that I would imagine it's probably closer to the no, because a lot of the original art in the Vatican shows Lucifer as like a beautiful angel that falls to pride. They don't show him as like the red devil.
Right. Which I think is more accurate. I
Yeah,
would argue.
but by the time you get to like a lot of the like, or no, that's Salem witch trials. I was gonna say by the time
Burn the witch.
yeah, by the time you get to like the Salem witch trials was 1860, 40
Definitely
something.
the 1800s.
Look it up, John.
I want to say they were. But by then the red horn devil is the popular interpretation of what the devil looks like.
Oh, shit. 1692.
1692?
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's a lot later than I thought.
Yeah, wow.
1692 and 1693.
Oh, okay.
So, between
That's a
between
lot.
February
That's a
and May.
lot earlier than I thought. Holy
way
crap!
earlier.
Actually, no, that makes sense because they were around the start of the American colonies.
Yeah.
Yeah, which...
Yeah.
Well, when were the... I guess that makes sense, yeah. Was it after then? When did we kick out the Brits? What year?
1776.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you...
I always thought
They're
the Salem
still- they
witch
were
trials
still-
happened before we separated from them.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
1692 and 1776. It's almost 100 years afterwards.
Wow. Cool. I've learned something. I'll probably forget it later tonight, but that's okay. Whatever. Cool, dude. Yeah. The demonology I've always been super into just to try and understand the enemy. Because I feel like when I
mean, you want the funny, like crazy demonology stuff? Go look at like the Lesser Key of Solomon. That's the goofy book.
I need to read it.
You really shouldn't actually.
Oh, okay.
If it has
Apocrypha?
if it has any sort of truth to it, it's one of the most terrifying books in existence. I don't know that it does,
Why?
but it's
Why?
definitely
How?
one
What
of
do you
the.
mean?
Well, so you know how Solomon builds the temple of God, right? He's the most wise man. A lot
Amen.
of the
Hallelujah.
he's like one of the most wise kings in the Bible, right? That's his shtick.
Okay. Yeah.
Apparently, so the story goes, he tricked demons into being like helping build the temple of God. And so that was like one of the things that made him so wise is that he was able to literally trick demons into helping build this holy temple.
Well, they're not all knowing, so they're not above being able to be tricked.
Exactly. And so that's part of the reason why he's supposed to be like this super wise king.
That's
right?
cool.
He literally tricked demons into. So the
What a
lesser
flex,
key,
dude.
the Lesser Key of Solomon was not written by Solomon, but apparently it's supposed to be this book that includes, I think it's 37. I think it's 37 demons that he apparently used to be able to do this, or it's 37 of the demons that he used, but probably not all of them. And it's basically what they want, what they require to be summoned, what they want in return for their deal, what they offer, that kind of thing. It's
like witchcraft
all
stuff.
literally like the how-to cookbook for witchcraft.
You get a
kind of
baby's
thing.
finger and a hair off some old man's head, and you stir it around a pot, and you get a spell.
Exactly. It's that kind of shenanigans. But apparently, if it's to be believed, it's one of the most like terrifying concepts of somebody thought that it was a great idea to put that in a book and disseminate that information, which is crazy.
Wild.
I don't think it has any substance to it. But at the same time, it's one of those deals that like, if you believe in that side of that is a legit text that is real, that's
that apocrypha.
That's a terrifying, like, not only do they all exist in their own in their own right. But you have the textbook on literally how to summon them and use them.
I mean, do you believe in witchcraft? Do you think that's real?
Not anymore.
Really?
I think. Well, so we know that to some degree it probably had to be in biblical times, because it's said like the really big ones are like pharaohs, magicians were able to perform magic. Like that's like a known thing that was there, right? They when Moses challenged them, he challenged their magic and he performed better magic than them using the miracles of God. Like that's it. But it was never said that they were charlatans or that they were fakes. It literally was like they were using magic. We don't know where the source was from. We don't know what they were worshiping to be able to get that power, but we know that it existed, or at least it's implied that it existed.
Yeah.
And it's never mentioned or said that they were fakes. So, and a lot of the struggles in the Old Testament with the Israelites and other countries were demons tempting other countries and either being worshipped as minor deities or being worshipped as themselves, and bringing prosperity to these other places. So like there had to be some sort of influence that they had, because a lot of it was like these other places would be very, very rich, very, very developed places where everybody there was like, this is what we do. We worship this God because he's brought prosperity to us. Yeah. And it was the difference between they would sell their souls for this earthly prosperity versus the Israelites who were downtrodden and beaten, but they retained the sanctity of their souls. Right. And that was that's a huge part of the struggles that the Israelites have with other nations in the Old Testament.
Cool, yeah.
So, I mean, for those to be, even from a narrative standpoint, the struggles, you have to acknowledge that the demons and the practitioners thereof who used their power had to have something behind it. Like they wouldn't, there wasn't like there was mass conning of like nations on that scale to be able to accomplish what they did. There was something behind that. So to some level, sure, I do believe that it's possible that it could have existed back then. But that said, we don't really have a great historical record for those times. The Bible is like one of the biggest primary documents for that if you're going to go off of it. And I think it's for me, it's kind of like speaking in tongues. It's probably something that's died out. It's not really around anymore. It's not something that God bestows anymore. That is there. That said,
you don't think so?
I don't think that most of those gifts are still around. I know that that's a hotly debated like thing.
Oh,
that
for sure. It's a huge.
And there are people that say that it is, people that say it isn't. I'm gonna go with my brother Kale on this one. He's done the study on it, and he was like, "Nope, they're gone." So
interesting.
I'm going to trust him on that.
Do you know why he says that?
I have absolutely no idea.
I have no personal take. I've no. The Pentecostals believe that you need to be baptized in the Holy Spirit, and when you do, you will speak in tongues. Right? At least there's an expectation.
Right.
Which is the Assemblies of God's, the Chi Alpha. It's what we attend. Which I've never spoken in tongues, but I am very certain that I have the Holy Spirit within me.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay. So immediately then that feels off to me, right? So it's, okay. The gifts of the Holy Spirit, there's a ton of them.
Yeah.
There are a lot.
Yes. And I don't know. I asked him about it, and he was like, he at the time was like, here's a passage, here's a passage, here's a passage. And he listed out like 7 or 8 or something. Where he was like, these all imply at the very least that these gifts are either actively dying out or completely gone. And these are not around anymore. And he's like, that's why I believe this. And I was like, makes sense. But at the same time, I don't remember what they were, and I don't remember the argument that he had specifically for that.
I've never heard that perspective. So now I am very curious.
That's cool. That's like a really hotly debated whether or not you believe that like speaking in tongues, any of the like casting out demons is still around. Because there are still some churches that very much practice them. There are some
exorcisms and stuff.
Yeah. There are churches that believe that is 100% malarkey. So it's kind of
a aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a whichever denomination I guess you believe in. And I don't think even for the ones that do believe that they're there, I personally think that it's probably a bit strange. But at the same time, I don't think it's not like a salvation issue where it's like a difference between what we fundamentally believe and agree on as being like the gospel, as being the message that Jesus has for us. I don't think that that's a overly detrimental aspect of the difference in faith.
So what about the people who walk around claiming that they're witches, even today?
I think the easiest, well, on one hand, to the people who do it ironically or to the people who do cosplay?
No, like actually.
Oh.
They like claim and they're dead serious about it.
I think to some extent, a lot of that kind of stuff can be rooted in if you believe it hard enough, you're going to make it fit in your worldview. And like that's a part of what we do as humans.
Well, can you not use that as an argument against Christianity?
You totally could. Like I think, but that's something that we do as humans. I don't think that that's like an escapable part of the way that our minds rationalize the world around us. And I think that like if you convince somebody of something, 99% of the time, if they go into something believing, having a predisposition to a belief, they're going to change whatever facts they can to be able to fit it into their worldview. You see it in politics all the time, right? Whether or not a perfect example is like during during like the Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton election, right? There was so much mudslinging on either side, right?
Yep.
If you said something negative about Hillary Clinton, it didn't matter if it was on the left or right saying it. The other side is going to immediately spin that back around and turn it on to the other, like, oh, but she only did this because of, oh, he only did this because of, and you're like, okay. At this point, we both know that there's dirt on both of them. Cool. But it's stuff like that or like conspiracy theorists are a perfect example. You tell the flat earthers that the earth isn't flat. And they're like, okay, let me point a laser across. And then it turns out that it's not flat. And they're like, I don't know. I actually haven't watched that Netflix documentary. I really need to do that.
Which one?
There was a Netflix documentary that they funded where a bunch of flat earthers got together to prove that the world is flat. And one of the deals that they did was they needed to, it was like they were shining a light over a certain distance. And it was just so that the curvature of the earth was such that if you like had the light at one level, it should be right there. If you raise it a couple feet, it should be right there based on the curvature of the earth. Well, they ended up proving that the earth is round. It does have curvature.
Well, there you go.
They literally proved themselves wrong, and they spent like thousands of dollars on scientific equipment to do it. But it's that kind of stuff where like, I don't think that most of those beliefs come from, especially like for the flat earther side, those beliefs don't come from the actual like understanding of physics and the science around the world. They come from the distrust of the government and the media.
Yes.
Like it's
super true.
Primarily
distrust of authority and what the authority says is truth.
Exactly. It's mostly rooted in a negative argument, not a positive argument about what you actually believe. But like for the witchcraft deal, I think it's kind of the same thing. Like if you believe that you had psychic powers and that you manifest everything in the world around you and something goes wrong, you'd be like, okay, this is my mind challenging me.
What do you think about astral planing?
I mean, I don't necessarily like, to be fair, there is plenty of text in the Bible about angels and demons fighting a war around us and our battle being a spirit, like a battle of spirits and not a physical battlefield that we can see. So if you want a justification for that, that would be the biblical one or something along those lines.
Do you know what astral planing is?
No.
It's like basically you separate your soul from your body and you kind of hover over it and then you exist in the spiritual realm, if you will. It's witchcrafty. I got into trying to figure out how to lucid dream for a while there, and that community, if you will, that it kind of bleeds into astral planing. They're kind of two similar things. People trying to elevate themselves over the physical, if you will, or seeking something beyond it at least. And astral planing falls under the category of witchcraft because you separate yourself from the physical being, and there's a ton of people claim they can do it or they have done it. And there's documented things. Even the CIA has released a whole declassified document, 30-page something about astral planing and how to do it.
Really?
Yeah, I've read through it. Very interesting read.
What do they...
They claim, people who do it claim to meet entities who they claim to be benevolent, where I would argue they're malevolent and
Yeah.
tricking them. But
Well, I mean, like the whole deal would be like most demons don't necessarily, like, they're not necessarily like negative. A lot of them will just give you things because the only intention that they have is to draw you away from God.
exactly.
Like they don't need to draw you away forcibly.
Super true.
If they can entice you away, then like it's less effort on their part and you're chilling.
I've been very convinced of the war around us, if you will, and our part in it, especially witchcraft. My aunt and uncle, who I respect a ton, they went on a mission trip over to Africa way back when, and they talk about how like actively witches and warlocks walk around over there.
Really?
They will outwardly say that they are a witch and or a warlock, and they will target Christians either in America or having influence, whether in Africa, anywhere else in the world, right? A name, and they will do these rituals to please demons. So then those demons will go and torment them or whatever, trying to take them away from God, if you will.
That's crazy.
And they try and meddle in stuff and things. Yeah, there's lots of cool YouTube videos of witches and or warlocks, which is a fun word.
Yeah.
Coming to Christ, if you will. And they talk about their experiences either in Africa or anywhere else in the world with their people and what they tried to do.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff, dude.
That's so interesting.
Yes, it's fascinating to me because it's something that in America we are not privy to. It's something that we are not exposed to. It's something that we dismiss very quickly.
Well, and I think,
but in the rest of the world, it's way more normal.
Yeah. Well, and I think that probably mostly has to do with how we view the spiritual in America.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think we don't view the divine or the spiritual or religious aspects of even the religions that are popular in America in like even close to the same way as it's viewed in other countries.
Yeah.
And I think that like that's crazy that witchcraft is like not only an accepted thing over there, but that it's like people can just do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not like culturally speaking, it's not dominated by Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to somebody who is the opposing view of Christianity, if you will, it's not necessarily viewed as somebody bad.
Right.
I guess. So
Yeah.
it's chill.
Well, they get power from an entity. Cool.
Yeah.
Why do I care?
I believe a lot of those people, it's the same. They're tricked.
Mm-hmm.
They think they're
Yeah.
doing good by whatever means that they have been deceived, if you will.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder, like, for the astral projecting part of that, if some of that is truly like you get into a meditative state and there is visions that happen there, because like there are so many people who like, I think that's why I've never done them. I actually don't really want to, but like I've heard that hallucinogenics can be crazy drugs for like giving people these realizations and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because you see visions, they feel very, very real. They
They'll
feel
meet
very,
entities
very,
that they all claim to
You could
feel
potentially meet
love
entities.
and
Yes.
warmth.
And for a lot of people, those can either be transformative experiences. They can be very, very negative experiences that scar them for life.
Yeah.
But like, I wonder how much of that is getting into like a meditative state, and then whether it's a hallucination or whether it's the manifestation of their own will and their views reinforcing themselves in a literally like a dreamlike sense.
Yeah.
And almost like a lucid dream sense. I'd be very curious to see if like the biology of how that happens, but I just engage with that logically.
I've been really intrigued in dreams and the meaning of them, because we know throughout the Bible that God will use dreams as a way to communicate with us.
Yeah.
So, okay, if there was a while there where we were talking about it yesterday, I was like you, where as soon as I hit the pillow, I faded to black and I woke up the next morning, didn't remember a thing. Right?
Yeah.
Trying to remember them actively, your brain will remember them for a little bit, and if you write it down,
you can get better at remembering them.
Yeah, it's like a muscle that you're trying to build.
Yeah.
And after remembering dreams, I don't know if I've had any that mean anything, but I've absolutely had some that make me think and go, oh, that's kind of what does that mean? You know?
Yeah.
Which is fun to me. It's fun. I want to keep getting better at it.
I generally don't have anything like the dreams that I remember are normally not the meaningful ones.
Yeah.
And they are very, very much like the knee jerk, like, oh, that was weird. Whatever.
And then it's gone.
And then it's gone. Yeah. Like I have very, very rarely had impactful dreams where it was like, oh, that was a dream. That was crazy. But I don't know. That could just be that I don't dream a ton. Or I don't remember my dreams hardly at all.
I would like the idea that people being possessed and stuff like that is not necessarily a thing anymore. I think that is a very American viewpoint.
I think, yeah.
I think the Bible makes it pretty clear that people can be possessed, especially if they don't have the Holy Spirit within them. I think if you have the Holy Spirit within you, you can't be possessed. I think you can be tempted and or messed with by demons, but I don't think it's
Well, I think me personally, I don't know if it's the American in me being skeptical or
the Hollywood even of the Hollywoodization of all of it.
Yeah, I think it's much more common for people to be tricked. Like I don't think
it
most people inherently understand or necessarily have like these very vehemently against Christianity viewpoints.
It's true.
Outside of they've either had met somebody who had really bad experiences with the church, which does unfortunately happen.
Been there.
Yeah. And like I have problems with some denominations of Christianity because it feels like they just drive people away.
Yeah.
And they give everybody a bad reputation. But at the same time, there are just as many people who grew up in places where religion was kind of not a big deal to them. And so they're like, why are people making a big deal about this? And then they see, like, especially with our politics, a lot of our politics is motivated by religion. Like that's a huge portion of why our culture functions the way that it does.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people look at that, or they see like a couple TikTok videos of pastor slams liberal, or like liberal debates pastor, like they see this in the online space part of it, it's very, very easy to get either a wildly positive view of Christianity and to jump into it and get into it without realizing what you're getting into, or to get really, really turned off to religion, like as a whole, and want to just do away. Like that's where you get like the 2016, 2012 Reddit atheists that are like, actually, I need to prove on my Reddit thread why you're wrong in every single way possible and why religion is a cancer on the world. But that's like where that kind of stuff comes from, is either they have really traumatic experience with the church, or they have a really negative view, and it's not really based in a view of reality. It's based on like a caricature of what they see online.
Cool, dude. Do you think demons have power? And
Absolutely.
If so, what? How? Like to what extent? I
think they have to. Satan's not an idiot. He got a third of heaven to come with him. Like unironically, he's not. It can't be stupid.
You're so right.
Like he got a third of the angels to fall with him. Like, to
like not choose God, kind of silly, but otherwise they're pretty smart.
Exactly. Well, and like there are plenty of there are so many good pieces of literature that explore different reasons, like that give a parody of the Bible or the biblical situation, and like why angels would have fallen and followed Satan. And I think while that narratively can be super engaging, like there is so much religious imagery, and it's such a cultural thing for Americans about that, and like using that is so smart as like from an author standpoint. Making anything inherently reference back to the Bible is such an easy, like, Americans know that. Yeah. Even if you don't like the Bible, you will know some stories from the Bible.
It's true. Culturally,
especially when you get to like Luciferian imagery, that is a completely different conversation. But to say that demons don't have power, I think, is to cheapen the entirety of the conflict that like goes on throughout the Bible and the conflict that we're told that we're caught up in. And I think that normally demons' power is to give. They don't take away nearly so much as they give. Well, I think there's sure. I think the best way to draw people away from God is to give them something, is to not give them a reason to go to God. Like, I think you make easy times for people. People in easy times don't need to have like they don't feel that they need a crutch to lean on to be able to get it through the morning. It's not something that they feel the need for. They don't need a reason to be.
Is that not the idea then where when you choose Christ, that's when the battle begins?
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden now you're seeking your comfort in God, and now they want to make you uncomfortable. So then you doubt
potentially.
God.
I mean, there is that aspect. I think a lot of it though is, what's the Morgan Freeman quote from his movies? Like, if you pray to God for patience, does he just make you patient, or does he give you the opportunity to practice it?
Right.
If you pray to God that your family gets along, does he just make them magically get along, or does he put them all in a room together and let them practice loving each other? Mm-hmm. Right? Like I think God puts us in situations where he allows the specific temptations that are working against us to be able to work against us in a way where if we choose to be dedicated, we can overcome it. I think that truly most demons only ever want to turn you away by alleviating the things that would draw you to God. And a lot of it is not, there is, to be fair, the aspect of like, some people get angry at God when they lose a loved one, or when something goes wrong in a relationship. There is an aspect of demons do probably take away as a mechanism to drive people away. But I think the more dangerous aspect of it, especially in America, is the giving. Like, we have so much that we take for granted, and if I'm comfortable, why would I need a deity?
You wouldn't.
Like, exactly. What is the purpose of me worshiping? What is the purpose of me doing this? Like, I'm comfortable. I don't need anything.
Yeah. If you can do it all on your own,
well, and
then you don't need God.
If I'm only worried about what I want and not what I need.
What do you think the role of angels are then? In their combat, in their like, are you sitting in your room fighting temptation, and then an angel comes down with a sword and starts fighting, or how does that look?
I think it's the angels probably either take the form of either the limiting factor, where they make it so that it's something you can handle, or they are the little things along the way that keep you going. Whether it's like the you almost trip along the way and you don't. You're like, oh my goodness, that was a little lucky moment right there. To the text every now and then that you'll get from your mom that's like, hey, just wanted to make sure you know that I love you, kind of thing. Like, it's those little things where just the little inkling in the back of somebody's mind that is somebody thinks of you, or the things that will make your day on a small level, I think are the little influences, where like, it's not the big events, it's not anything special, but it's the really, really small minutia that is something you can't really explain, but it just made you feel a little bit better.
Yeah. Cool.
I have a lot of those where I'm like, man, that was really cool that happened. That made me feel a little bit better about not maybe the whole situation I'm in, but it helped alleviate a little bit of the feelings. I'm glad that I got to see that.
Yeah. And of course, then all the credit goes to God for all that.
Yeah. And I think
that's what the angels would want, you know?
Exactly. And I think that's my personal take on it, but I don't know. It's a very interesting deal.
It is. I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah.
I want to know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's many answers in the Bible about that kind of stuff. It
No.
more tells us that it's happening and that we need to be aware that it's a thing.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where it leaves it.
Yeah. Well, and we're just told, hey, spirits, kind of real.
Kind of real. They're around you.
Yeah, they're around you all the time.
And there are bad ones that want to take you away from God.
Yeah.
Do you think they have the authority, or, well, do you think God would ever let them take people away from God?
I think...
Because that gets into free will predestination.
I was going to say, that gets into the whole, like, because, like, we know that to some degree, God does have... Like, he does control everything, and like, he hardened Pharaoh's heart.
He at least allows things.
Yeah, well, he at the very least allows things, but like, there were times where like, God hardened Pharaoh's heart as a lesson to Egypt. It says that God had some influence with Pharaoh, making him make the decisions that he did.
Yeah.
And whether he did it for the Israelites' benefit as well as the Egyptians, to be able to prove that he is God, right? Or whether he did it to make an example of somebody who he knew wouldn't have done it anyway. And so he didn't really feel the need to like...
Yeah, there's a lot of mystery around it where a lot of people will have their own theory.
Yeah, well, and whether you believe in free will or predestination, it's a whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely think that God, to some degree, lets stuff happen. Like, I think it's an unavoidable reality of the world that we live in, that bad things happen and that he does allow evil in the world.
I don't think, I believe it says that God is incapable of evil, right? So it's like, I don't know. Hey, John, can you look up where it says in the Bible that he like limits the amount of temptation that is able to come onto you, if you will? Like, supposedly I have this idea in my head that you will never be tempted to the point where there's not a door to get out of it. That makes sense. Like, there's never...
He'll always provide a way out.
Yeah.
Bad.
Like, is there a verse that...
There should be.
Well, yeah.
Alright.
The idea is kind of... There has to be some choice.
Yeah.
You know, there. Because
and
he's not making the choice then for you to fall into sin. He's not making the choice of sin.
Yes.
You know, it's a...
Well, and I think the way that I...
Immediately.
Oh, yeah?
1 Corinthians 10:13. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape that you may be able to endure it.
Yeah, so like any sin that
What a
is
homie.
ultimately your... What a homie, dude. What a G. Big JC upstairs. Yeah, it's solely your own decision then to sin or not, right?
Well, and I think that even if you take the predestination look and you say, hey, he knows what you're gonna... he knows what choice you're going to make, and he knows what challenges to throw at you.
Yeah.
I don't think that violates the sanctity of you making that decision. Because
I agree.
Even if you know that is a choice that exists and that he has put in front of you and that it was an obstacle that is there, you still have the choice. Like, whether or not he knows what you're going to pick, it's still your choice at the end of the day, and you still made it.
And Cody and I have been talking about it a lot.
Yeah.
Like, my personal understanding right now, currently, which has changed a lot over the past year. So it's not like it'll definitely change more so.
Oh, for sure.
But right now, I think I definitely lean a little bit more predestined. At least it says pretty clearly that we are chosen. But I also know that I made the decision to follow him.
Yeah.
So it has to be both somehow.
Yeah.
I don't know how that is, but like you're saying, how it doesn't ruin the sanctity, if you will.
Yeah. There's still a choice that you make
choice.
Independently, because even if God is all-knowing and an all-controlling being, we aren't. Like, whether or not you believe that it's predestined or whether or not you believe that you have free will, at the end of the day, you're the one making the choice.
Yeah.
Whatever your motivation is for that choice, you're going to make the action however you're going to make the action.
I agree.
And I think that is very, very important when you consider like how we talk about free will, how we talk about predestination, and how we talk about like, does the choice matter?
Yeah.
And I think it still does.
I mean, if I didn't make the choice in any capacity whatsoever, then you can make the argument that either the love is not real and or the idea of, I don't know. And that's probably the big one.
Yeah.
I had something else. It's gone. Yeah, it's cool. The whole debate is so fascinating to me. My brothers have really challenged me around multiple perspectives on it. It's been fun to try and debate with them all around it. They really challenged my idea of, or rather my definition of love that I kind of labeled onto God, if that makes sense.
Right.
I kind of put God into my box of what I thought love was.
Right.
Right? Which is, I think, a dangerous thing to do. Because then that...
For sure.
It really does limit the way that you... I mean, of course, that's how everybody's going to read Scripture and or interpret it, is through their own lens and perception of what it is that they're...
Right.
Who it is their God is, right?
Yeah.
Kind of crazy, dude.
It's so cool.
So awesome.
Also, what time is it?
Yeah, this is...
7:30.
Okay, then I probably need to get going.
All right, this has been Ryder
Paslay.
Dude, you're awesome. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, no
Any
problem.
final remarks?
don't make chlorine gas in your toilet for the love of all that is good and holy. Please.
And if you do, we are not liable.
Yeah. All of this is subject to being source checked, please. Please check the sources. All of what we said could be BS.
Amen, bro. All right, cool. This is awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the podcast. If you want to support us, you can find us on Patreon. The link will be in the description. If you join the Patreon, you'll get each episode a week early, along with some maybe blooper reels, all sorts of fun stuff that we might end up cutting out of the regular episode.
Oh, yeah.
You'll also be supporting the team, me, Dylan, and John behind the camera. It's a little skeleton crew we got going.
Links in the down under.
In the land down under.
See, that's funny because that's Australia. Yeah, you guys can find us on any of the big podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, I guess. If that was a podcast platform, that'd be great. Yeah, we'll see you in the next episode.
God bless you all.
It was good.
That was good.
I like the little shitter about the YouTube thing.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
funny.
that's good. Ow, dude. Ow.